The Boston Tea Party wasn't a spontaneous event that happened overnight. The event itself was, but the cause of it is rooted much deeper than that. The Tea Act of 1773 was the match that ignited the flame, and the Tea Act was an act that was pushed out to help the East India Company to get out of a financial crisis. This act reduced the tax on imported British tea, which sounds like it would benefit the general population, but in reality, this act was not to support the general public, but to benefit the East India Company only. At this time, the Townshend Acts had been repealed, and America was finally gaining their independence from the British. The Townshend Acts placed taxes on things such as glass, lead, paint, paper, and tea. Before the Townshend Acts were repealed, many Americans preferred to consume smuggled tea, which was much cheaper and did not have to be taxed. This was heavily looked down upon by the British, as this brought down their sales. The quality of the smuggled tea did not match that of the East India Company, but this did not matter to many Americans, as they overlooked the quality and appreciated the fact that they did not need to support Britain in order to enjoy their tea. In response to the immense amount of tea smuggling in America, approximately 900,000 pounds per year, Britain pushed out the Tea Act, which angered the Americans greatly. America was very tired on the hold that British Parliament was repeatedly trying to have on them, and the Tea Act of 1773 was the final straw. The extra cost for the tax on the tea was not the issue, it was the boundary that British Parliament crossed, and America was tired of it. American colonists saw this as a direct attack on their rights to independence and constitution. They believed that this was an act of taxation without representation and began organizing protests and boycotts to convey their anger.
The Boston Tea Party was an event that took place on December 16, 1773. The event largely consisted of citizens of the American colonies who were being relentlessly taxed by Britain to pay for their war debts from the 7 Years' War. Among these angry citizens, two anti-tax groups eventually formed. These were the Loyal Nine and the Sons of Liberty. These two groups eventually merged into one and kept the name the Sons of Liberty. The Sons of Liberty are a group of men from all different careers and social circles. They were known for resisting the British taxes and laws and were considered a formal organization. But because they were resisting their government, they had to be what was known as an underground group, meaning they had to conceal their identities in order to avoid being arrested. They dressed as Mohawk Indians during this particular act of defiance against the British government in order to do so. Their most famous organized protest began as they marched from Griffin's Wharf shouting, "Boston Harbor is a teapot tonight." The Sons of Liberty boarded the 3 ships that were currently moored in the Boston Harbor and threw all of the tea overboard, just like the leaves that were collected and put in the bottle mentioned below. These consisted of 342 chests of tea, approximately worth $1.7 million, which is the same as $18.6 million today. There was no physical violence caused by the Sons of Liberty, and none of the ship's crew were harmed. However, King George III immediately closed the port of Boston and declared that it would remain closed until the destroyed products were paid in full by the city of Boston. This protest brought Massachusetts another step closer to the Revolutionary War and the war that began a mere 16 months later at Lexington and Concord.
The consequences of the Boston Tea Party came upon the people in many ways. In order to maintain control over the colonies, the British government came to form the Coercive Acts. This was brutally designed in order to force the colonies into submission after their protest. The main effect these laws had on the people was the shutdown of the Boston port, which was a key economic factor for the area. This harbor was to remain closed until the people in the town had paid for all of the tea that was wasted the night of the protest. The Quartering Act developed soon later, which gave British troops permission to stay in private residence when deemed necessary. This further angered the people of the colonies, as they were upset by seeing British soldiers throughout their towns invading their privacy. These acts ended up backfiring heavily on British rule, as it encouraged the colonists to fight against injustice and for freedom. which soon led to them becoming independent from Britain.